Hi everybody, this is the second video for the writing course. The content that I want to talk about today is functional languaging. This is a theory that was started back in the late 60s, early 70s by Michael Halliday and a group that was working with him in Australia called the New London Group. And you may have had some introduction to this group from Matt Farber's class at the New Literacies course, because the New Literacies and approach to technology that people are using today is influenced a great deal by this school of thought as well. The idea is that for many years linguists were talking about language just in terms of the structures that were there. And so we had a lot of practices that were just focused on structures. And what we know from linguistics and anthropology is that language actually emerged as human behavior to serve specific needs that we have, to actually have functions. And so if you want to think back, I don't know how many years you'd have to go back to be there when language actually emerged for the first time. But let's just imagine, for the sake of argument, that the first word that a group of people actually starts using is maybe the word water. It could be some other word. It could be the word mother, or it could be something else that's really involved in everyday life. But let's just imagine that there's this group of emerging humans, and the first word that they come up with is water. Why do they come up with that word? It probably makes it really easy for them to work around and do things with water, or to go to the water, or that type of thing, that actually saying water becomes a functional thing. And the grammar, the relationships, water in, water on, water under, the things that start to emerge in prepositions and other structural pieces have to do with the things we're trying to get done, not because there's some sort of inherent universality to the grammar. It's the world that kind of forces a specific kind of grammar and other structures to show up in language. So this has a lot to do with writing, because when we're talking about writing, we kind of get bogged down in the idea that there's only two kinds of writing. We talk about writing narrative and expository, and I'll talk about how those fit into these functions in just a moment. But the instrumental purpose is the most basic human function for languaging. And Michael Halliday always talked about language as languaging, because he really hates the idea that we turn it into a static object, when in reality it's always an action or an act. So languaging is something we do, and we've invented these words and grammar structures to do the things that we're doing. So instrumental languaging is just how we get the things that we want and need. So if we need water, we say the words that get us the water. So think about that, though. In baby language, it's really clear that they're just demanding by using the nouns. Wah wah, or gink, those kinds of things. They're just demanding those things. That's that instrumental language. And most infant language is instrumental in nature. Children are trying to get what they want. And they realize that language works really early on because they get such good reinforcement in the response that they get to it. They use it like a remote control, like a clicker, and that clicker works every dang time. If it works most of the time, they're going to be really motivated to use it. So that instrumental function is how we get what we want and need in the world. That becomes really tied up with politeness in the adult world. So somebody may not say drink. They may say something like, "Is anybody else in here thirsty?" And then that might be their way of saying, "Is anybody going to get up and get me a drink?" And that might be their way of saying, "I'll get you a drink too." So that instrumental function is really clearly there to just get done the things that we need and want done. Along with the instrumental function, language, even for infants, serves a personal function. And that personal function is expressive. It's the function that we use to tell people what we're thinking and what we're feeling. We're not even always telling people that. Sometimes we're just doing that to get it out there, and we can hear it as well. And it becomes solid for us when we're actually able to hear ourselves voicing our opinions, our feelings, and so on. And you'll notice this sometimes, that when you're completely alone and you do something that makes you feel stupid, you might go, "Oh, that was so dumb." And who are you talking to when you do that? It's yourself. That's just that sense of expression that you've got going. So instrumental, really about getting the things that we want and need. Personal is about expressing our mind and our heart. So the next one is interactional. And this interactional function is something that's true because we as humans are pack animals. It's not too far off from the instrumental, because this is a specific kind of need that we have. We need to have other people interact with us. And sometimes the language that we're using is just to draw our people in and have them involved with us and doing something with us. And probably the best example of that we have in the modern world is just conversation. And I don't know what conversation was like throughout the ages, but we know that conversation is not usually topic-driven. You'll notice this when you're talking to somebody about something, the topics drift over 4 or 5 minutes to where you're not talking even about the same things that you were when you started a conversation. We tend to ignore this one, even though it's probably the one that people spend the most time on. In classrooms, we tend to ignore this idea of just communicating to communicate with other people. Again, that does meet an instrumental need for us, because as humans, we generally have this need to have interactions. This is a fascinating one, because this is the need, the human need, that is most likely and most frequently impaired in autistic spectrum disorders. So often to encourage interactional communication, we actually have to do explicit and direct instruction and guidance with kids who are on the autistic spectrum, because they don't feel this as an instrumental need. They have to be coached in it, because it's just not naturally something they desire. And that's, of course, on a spectrum, not something that's 100% for any of those kids. The next one is the regulatory function. And the regulatory function is when we use our language to control other people and things. When we're having a behavior moment in the classroom and we have to tell somebody, get down off that chair, or it's time for lunch, I'm gonna count to 10, and when I'm done counting down to 10, I want everybody to be ready to go to lunch. Those are the kinds of things we say when we're trying to be in control of other people. And there's also much more subtle language that we use when we're being manipulative and controlling, that kind of puts people in a situation where we're asking them to do what we want them to do. So that's a form of interactional speech, but really clearly our purpose is not just to have an interaction with people, but to control. So the next one is heuristic. And the heuristic function is problem solving, trying to figure things out. And let's just take a really basic problem, and I'll just show you how this one is kind of related back to the personal. When we're trying to solve a problem, we often speak without anybody being there. So if you lose your keys, do you often say to yourself things like, keys, where are they? Come on, keys, keys, keys. And you're not talking to anybody but yourself, so it does serve kind of this personal function, like that thinking aloud we were talking about there. But the heuristic is really, we use our words to try to solve problems. And sometimes when you're saying those words, keys, 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 you're really kind of running through that script of where was I, where was I, where did I put those, where could you be, and trying to get your words involved in leveraging that problem and making it work out. And then we can actually use the words to solve much more complex problems as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've got 2 more functions. The representational function is where we're just trying to talk about the way things are, what we want to represent in the world. This is that sort of straight communication of the what's, where's, and when's that we're trying to get across for people. And that type of communication, just a sec. I'm just going to see if I've got another example of that there. Just conveying messages, telling people about the real world, expressing a proposition. Phrases like "I'll tell you" or "here's what I know" would be representational. And then finally, the imaginative function. Has all of the things in it that we would expect there. That idea of what if, or what would it be like, or let's pretend, or let's see, jokes, riddles, stories, all of those kinds of things, where the purpose is not to represent something that's there in the real world, but to talk about things as they could be, or to pretend the way things might be. And the thing that's important for me to bring up at this point, and I won't do much more with this, is that we tend to do almost all of our writing instruction here and here. And that's how we get kind of locked into the idea of there's just expository and narrative. Narrative tends to be this imaginative text. Representational tends to be the expository text. But we don't realize that we have all of these other purposes intertwined anytime we're speaking and anytime we're writing something authentic. And so what we want to do is we want to talk less about let's write narrative, let's write expository. Much more, we want to talk to the people that are writing in our classrooms in terms of what do you want to do? Do you want to try to imagine something new? Do you want to try to tell people the way things are? Do you want to try to solve a problem? Do you want to try to get other people involved with you? Do you want to express your feelings? Do you want to try to get something? Do you want to try to... all of these 7 purposes are going to be intertwined with our purposes for writing as well. So when I talked earlier about the idea that we need to have authentic audiences and authentic purposes, we need to have much more authentic purposes outlined in terms of our writing. What are we trying to do? And when we talk to kids in Writers' Workshop, in conferences and so on, we want to talk in these kinds of terms. So one of the first things I would want you to think about is how can you put these into everyday language for the kids you work with, so that when you're sitting in a conference with a kid straight across from you and they're talking about what they want to do with their writing and they say, I don't know, then you can pull out a piece of writing that's designed to get other people to interact with you. What would that look like? Facebook messaging, Instagram posts, Facebook posts. Those are great examples of people just trying to get other people to interact with them. Personal, pull out a journal and show them what it's like to journal about your dreams. Instrumental, an order form. It's a perfect example of a type of writing that we do where we fill in a form and it's got that instrumental purpose to it. Have you ever had a kid try to make order forms? When kids start to actually mock up little examples of commercial types of writing, they often go to things that they know from home and mail orders and that type of thing. So think about that. If you organized your writing less in terms of just expository and narrative and talked a lot more with your writers about what are you trying to do, you're going to get a different sense of authenticity, a different sense of purpose than you would otherwise. All right, thanks.